let's talk about dark aesthetics in Twin Peaks and its impact on media that you're probably already familiar with, whether you've watched Twin Peaks or not. The reason why I want to talk about dark aesthetics and the dark aesthetic influence Twin Peaks has had is because so many people, whenever they think of a dark aesthetic muse or inspiration, we think of the obvious, such as Dracula or any vampire or witch related movies, horror films. However, Twin Peaks has influenced so much more than you know, and there are so many great muses that you can take inspiration from the Twin Peaks universe. It came out in 1989 and was very prominent in the 90s. However, there are some people who just haven't gotten the chance to watch it, so I'm gonna try to keep this video pretty spoiler free and mainly focus on the style and aesthetics of Twin Peaks versus the actual story, just because I don't want to ruin it for anyone in case this video sparks an inspiration to watch the show. Okay, so what is Twin Peaks, or at least how would you describe the Twin Peaks aesthetic? It is iconic on its own, and sometimes if you just see it, you know it, but how would you describe it? So of course it is a 90s show prominently, but there are some 1950s influence. Throughout the show, you'll know that it does take place in the 90s based off of the technology, the verbiage, some of the fashion. However, you cannot deny that there are some retro aspects to it. And there's this beauty in Twin Peaks where it feels like it's a capsule lost in time, and it's almost a timeless setting. It sets place in the Pacific Northwest, specifically Washington State. So the overall setting is a bit gloomy, it's a bit eerie, warm, campy greens, stark reds based off of some aspects and certain places, and overall just a campy feel. There are going to be some notable motifs that repeat throughout the show that have become iconic to Twin Peaks, such as cherry pie, black coffee, plaid flannels, and of course the 50s and 90s. It's an overall dreamy, surreal show, and it has influenced shows such as X-Files, Pretty Little Liars, Riverdale, and The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. But my favorite part, and dare I say one of the most influential and most important parts of Twin Peaks, and if you want to dress as though you are in Twin Peaks, is the characters. So I want to start off talking with my personal favorite, and I think she's overall a fan favorite, is Audrey Horne. When it comes to Audrey Horne, she has been nicknamed the Queen of Hearts. I won't delve into why in case that leads to any spoilers. But to give you an idea of why she's the Queen of Hearts, picture this popular, flirtatious, quirky girl. There are definitely popular girl aspects to her, like in terms of like the typical 90s popular girl influences, but there's definitely a quirkiness to her style and personality, and there's something very offbeat about her. She wears sweaters and plaid skirts, and dare I say that is actually considered her uniform. So if you were to dress up as Audrey Horne, that plaid skirt is almost key, as well as her 1950s hairstyle and red lips. There's also an aspect of her wearing saddle shoes versus her heels. She wears her saddle shoes when she is in front of her father or anybody she wants to prove that she is someone to be taken seriously, and she puts on her heels whenever I feel like she's being her most truest to herself, which is very flirtatious. In many ways, she's kind of seen as like this young femme fatale, and you can tell that there are some influences of that in the red lips, the way that there's actually a very strong retro aspect to her style. And I've noticed whenever people do like a cosplay or a Halloween costume that is Twin Peaks related, they tend to always lean on dressing like Audrey Horne. I can say from personal experience, she was definitely one of my personal inspirations. I cannot talk about Twin Peaks without talking about Laura Palmer. The entire story begins with the mystery of her death. That is not a spoiler, that is kind of literally within the few seconds of you starting the show. Even though she is barely in the show, the image of Laura Palmer is still very prominent, and it says a lot about her character and adds this complexity to the story. In a way, she actually is a great style inspiration. It adds to this dark look and aesthetic and kind of eeriness to the show of who she is as a person and what all of her actions has led to. And also I always get a lot of comments of people saying that they're blonde or they have light brown hair and they feel like having a dark aesthetic is a bit difficult to do. And oftentimes I kind of just say, if you tend to have like a naturally blonde or light brown hair, when you dye it black or you wear black, you just automatically have this stark contrast to you that creates a dark aesthetic. But sometimes that's not the route people want to take, and sometimes you just want to dress harmonious with your color palette or your natural hair color and you don't want to dye your hair. And Laura Palmer might be an example of this. So she is actually known as the homecoming queen when we first meet her. She is well beloved, she's viewed as this town sweetheart, and even though there's this look of innocence to her, there's definitely a darker side. So there's this juxtaposition of you seeing her in the typical autumnal plaid skirts, baggy sweaters, and in contrast, you see moments of her in wearing darker colors, more form-fitting pieces, and it has like this 1980s mature formal wear. I also noticed that there is like a bit more volume in her hair when she's like showing this darker side to her as well, which I think pairs well with the 1980s formal wear. Josie Packard. Josie Packard of Twin Peaks is definitely just a style icon on her own. If you don't even watch the show and you just look at screenshots of Josie Packard's outfits, you can get inspired. And what I like about her is even though she's not an obvious route to take when dressing in a darker aesthetic, there is something about her that's so luxurious that you can implement the elements that she is known for into a darker style. So she is known as a femme fatale, like that typical 1920s film noir femme fatale trope. And when it comes to a dark aesthetic, the femme fatale is actually one of the easiest routes to take when dressing in a darker style. It has this moody look it adds this moody look to you. Her style is chic and streamlined. It's very 1980s sleek. So even though the show is primarily in the 90s, there's still gonna be that late 1980s influence in some of the more mature characters. Her hairstyle though reminds me of a very 1920s hairstyle, which I think adds to that femme fatale look, as well as her red lipstick. And overall she has a very luxurious look to her with her fur coats, and even the sweaters she wears, there's a bit more elevatedness to them. Let's talk about Shelley Johnson. So remember how at the beginning of the video I mentioned that there are several modern day shows today that have been influenced by Twin Peaks. And funny enough, one of them is Riverdale, and the actress for Shelley Johnson is actually the mom in Riverdale to Betty, I believe. It's been a while since I watched Riverdale, and I'm gonna be honest, I didn't finish it. Shelley Johnson is most known for her RR Diner girl outfit, this beautiful, minty, very 1950s-esque uniform. Now obviously that is not what she wears every single day. However, there's just something really iconic to this uniform. Kind of like with Audrey Horne, who is one of the most notable like costumes that people want to cosplay as. I feel like Shelley Johnson as this diner girl, as well as her boss, is the most iconic outfit that is notable in Twin Peaks. But outside of her diner uniform, she showcases this soft, feminine style that actually really adds to the dreamy aspect. And you do sometimes see her sport the classic flannels that are associated with the Twin Peaks realm. And I feel like she is a true image of this quiet town. Like she's definitely one of the characters that is incremental to the world building of Twin Peaks. You cannot talk about Twin Peaks and not talk about the main character himself, Agent Dale Cooper, who has made a name for himself on TikTok. Not Dale Cooper, but the actor who played Dale Cooper. He is all over my TikTok, and overall he just seems like an enjoyable actor and person, and he references his character as Dale Cooper oftentimes in his social media. When it comes to Dale Cooper, so even though I don't really talk a lot about menswear and maskwear on my channel, I do want to talk about Dale Cooper and what he adds to the show in terms of the motifs and how a lot of his favorite things in the show ends up being what is super iconic to Twin Peaks. And if you want to emulate the Twin Peaks look or have little motifs in your style that nod to the show, it's because of Dale Cooper. So he is the FBI agent that guides us through the world of Twin Peaks. He is technically an outsider of the town of Twin Peaks, but he ends up falling in love with it more than anybody. He has this polished agent look to him that contrasts his quirky personality and these different nuances. He does have this typical 80s, 90s oversized silhouette that goes over his polished look, which feels like it really nods to the time period. And his favorite motifs, of course, are his obsession with cherry pie and black coffee, and him constantly talking to his recorder, saying hi to Diane. I wanted to talk about Dale Cooper, even though most of his outfits is a suit and tie and a 90s baggy trench coat. I want to talk about him and how what you end up loving ends up becoming part of your style, even little things. They end up becoming motifs and patterns and little nuances that repeat in your style. For example, I don't have it on now, but I love spider webs and spiders and the motifs of that. So oftentimes I have a cardigan that has spider webs. My phone case has spider webs on it. I'm wearing a different necklace now for this video, but my mostly everyday necklace is a spider with a labradorite in it. And it's because I have a little bit of an obsession with spiders, silk spiders, and labrador. But yeah, sometimes the things that you end up loving and obsessing over end up becoming parts of your style. So whether it's spiders and spider webs like me, my friend of Dark Mother, her motif is bats and it becomes part of her style. She also implements the bat motif within her bags. And again, like what you end up loving and becoming obsessed with can become your style, like Agent Dale Cooper. Now, let's talk about the fabrics of the show and the overarching look and how it does tie everything together, because it gives an idea of like the overall mood of the show, the season, and the time period. So the fabrics in general give off a very eternal autumnal feel. It's almost like it's never spring, summer, or winter. It is this eternal fall look, which we love. We oftentimes see plaids, flannels, these academic patterns, all in fall colors. Like in this top left corner, she is wearing a silk plaid robe, and we cannot forget the 80s, 90s sweaters. It was a very loud knitted patterns that we'd see. And we have a lot of baggy silhouettes, and any times that we see anything fitted, it has that 1950s feel. So we have this beautiful juxtaposition of 90s oversized looks with the more fitted, structured looks of the 1950s. And below is the overall color palette that I feel like definitely speaks to Twin Peaks in general. I feel like Twin Peaks is not the only one that's an example of this, but sometimes whenever a show's world building is so strong, the setting itself feels like a character. And many times throughout the show, and even mentioned in the history book of the fictional, or not so fictional, history book of Twin Peaks even talks about how the town of Twin Peaks almost feels alive. So the setting as a character, it takes place in the Pacific Northwest, so we have the dark foresty greens, the eeriness coming from the fog rolling over the trees. We have the neon signs that we see in the diner or this place called the Roadhouse, One-Eyed Jack's. Sometimes they show the interiors of the home that feel very lived in, and they're very 1980s interiors. The place that I just mentioned is called the RR Diner, and the Black Lodge. I didn't show it in my collage, but this is the Black Lodge. And it is a very, again, I don't want to ruin it, but it is a part of this world of Twin Peaks, and it is very incremental to the story. And it adds to that surreal, dreamy aspect to the show and a bit of supernatural elements to it. But the color palette of the Black Lodge is so important to Twin Peaks. Like, obviously we have the beautiful greens that is nodding to the forest of Twin Peaks, but you have the black and reds of the Black Lodge. And whenever like you see keychains or things that are being sold on Etsy or like fan art, they oftentimes do a Black Lodge themed keychain or pin, and it has the classic, I think it's called a chevron style. So all of the looks and fabric choices and overall feel of the characters is all thanks to the costume designer of Twin Peaks, Patricia Norris. So unfortunately, Patricia Norris passed away in 2015 and did not continue on the Twin Peaks series. There is a newer season of Twin Peaks, season 3. And no, I did not talk about season 3. I mainly focused on the 90s and the first 2 seasons of Twin Peaks because I feel like the season 3 of Twin Peaks had a completely different feel to it, and I have nothing against it. I just feel like in terms of like a dark aesthetic, this campy feel that I want to talk about as a great inspiration if you're into darker styles is much more nuanced in the earlier show. But I quickly want to give my hat off to Patricia Norris because it is all thanks to Patricia Norris for Twin Peaks' overall look and feel. So Patricia Norris is the costume designer of Twin Peaks. But she has also been known for other notable works that you're probably familiar with and has won many awards for them. And I featured some of the screenshots here. So her overall style whenever she approaches the costume design of a piece is she loves to go for a lived-in look. She likes to really go for the authentic and accuracy of that time period. And what I love is that she really works closely with the directors to know that it is still very true to the work and it doesn't feel like a separate thing, and it's overall very cohesive. So whether it's the eeriness of the setting, the retro aspects of the style, or the off-putting elements of what a character chooses to wear, there is something about Twin Peaks that you cannot deny is a great dark aesthetic inspiration. And sometimes the most obvious styles and media is not create some of the most beautiful darker styles. And sometimes you have to mix these unlikely elements together to create your own look. I hope you enjoyed this video, and until next time, bye. All graphics that you see in this video, turn them into a PDF, and you can view these as little after show notes. It is available to my $1 and $5 Patreon members.